Ever wanted to know something about pastries other than the fact that they're delicious? Well, I've got you covered. First of all, what is a pastry? Pastries are various kinds of baked products made from ingredients such as flour, sugar, milk, butter, and or eggs. The thing that separates pastries from bread is the fact that pastries have much higher fat content than bread. Pastries work the way they work due to wheat flour and certain types of fat. When wheat flour is kneaded into the dough with water, it develops gluten. This is linked to the fact that protein in the flour forms bonds of other protein when it's hydrated. The gluten is what makes bread tough and elastic, so to stop the development of gluten, fat or oil is usually put into the dough. From here, there are 5 main types of pastries: short crust, flaky, puff, chew, and phyllo. Short crust is the simplest and most common form of pastry, and it's used for tarts, quiche, and pie bases. Short crust pastry is based on a half fat to flour ratio. Butter gives the pastry a rich flavor, while lard ensures optimal texture. Flaky pastries are pastries that expand when it's cooked due to having multiple layers. The main difference between flaky and puffy pastries is that in flaky pastries, large lumps of shortening are mixed into the dough as opposed to having a large rectangle of shortening that's used in puffy pastry. These lumps of shortening are what keeps the rolled particles of pastry in flaky pastries separate. Puff pastries are made using flour, butter, salt, and water, and because of these 4 ingredients, air gets in between the layers and expands when the puff pastry is being baked. Puff pastry dough is difficult to make and maintain because it must be kept at a temperature of approximately 16 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit to keep shortening from becoming runny. If the shortening is running, it won't have enough time to allow gluten strands to link up and retain the layering that makes puff pastry possible. Chew pastry is a light pastry that only uses butter, water, flour, and eggs. Chew pastry is often filled with cream. Phyllo pastries are paper-thin sheets of unleavened flour used in Middle Eastern and Balkan cuisine. Phyllo dough is made with flour, water, and a small amount of oil and raki. But who figured all of that out? The French, of course. However, France didn't get this idea until around the 16th century. Pastries, however, were traced back all the way to the times of the ancient Mediterranean, with the Greeks and Romans and Egyptians, also the Phoenicians. In fact, in 5th century BC, some Roman plays actually mentioned pastries with fruit fillings. After the Crusaders went to the Mediterranean, they were able to bring back pastry recipes to Northern Europe. However, it wasn't until mid-16th century where actual recipes for pastries would be completed and adapted in various European countries. Around this time, Spanish and Portuguese traders would bring chocolate to Europe. And soon after that, Europe realized that chocolate went really well with pastries. In the 19th century, the British brought Western-style pastries to Asia, and then their kinds of pastries became a smash hit. They were known as Western cakes to Far East Asians. However, before then, Asians had their own form of pastry making, which mainly used rice with fruit, sweet bean paste, and sesame-based fillings. Nowadays, pastry making is a combination of culinary ability and creativity. Decorating has become an important part of pastry preparation, and it often demands vigorous attention to detail over the course of many hours. And that is the extent of my knowledge of pastry and pastry making. And hopefully that gets you interested in pastry making and pastries. And I've said pastries a lot of times. Actually, I'm going to count how many times I said pastries so far, including this time that I said pastry. Okay, it's around 36. I kind of lost count after 20, so... And hopefully that's enough info about pastry, unless you decide to get into pastry making, in which case you're going to need to learn a hell of a lot more.